It was just another quiet evening at home until the phone call came and turned our world upside down. Marcus and I were sitting at the dinner table, enjoying the salmon and roasted potatoes I'd made, when his cell phone started buzzing. He glanced at the screen and froze. "Who is it?" I asked. "It's Selena," he said grimly. Selena, his 19-year-old daughter from his disastrous first marriage who he hadn't spoken to in years. My heart sank. Nothing good could come of this. Marcus answered the call and I studied his face as he listened, his eyes narrowing in concern. After a few terse words, he hung up and let out a long sigh. "What did she want?" I asked, bracing myself. "She's coming to live with us. Her roommate kicked her out, so she's driving here tomorrow." I dropped my fork, my appetite vanishing. Here? For how long? She didn't say, but it sounded like she plans to stay indefinitely. I felt the panic rising in my chest. We'd worked so hard to build a good life, a stable home. Marcus and I both came from broken families, rife with lies and betrayals. It had taken years of therapy and trust-building to heal those wounds. The last thing we needed was a destructive, entitled 19-year-old tearing open those scars again. "Can't her mother take her in?" I asked. Marcus shook his head. "You know how that went. The divorce was nuclear. They haven't spoken since." Before I could object further, we heard the front door open. Our 16-year-old son Eli walked in, home from basketball practice. He joined us at the table, his wavy brown hair damp with sweat. "Hey, Mom, Dad, what's going on?" he asked, detecting the tension immediately. He was an exceptionally perceptive kid. Marcus gave him a tired smile. "We just got a call from your sister Selena. She's going to be staying with us for a while." Eli's eyes widened in surprise. He knew little about Selena, other than the few bitter stories Marcus had told over the years. Okay, Eli said slowly. "How long is she staying?" "We don't know yet," Marcus admitted. An uneasy silence settled on the room. I could imagine the worried thoughts spinning through Eli's mind. Selena's sudden arrival would disrupt the stability he valued so deeply, but he was too kind-hearted to voice those concerns. I reached over and gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. Then I turned to Marcus, my eyes flashing with determination. "We need to set firm ground rules," I said. "No freeloading or taking advantage. If she wants to stay here, she needs to get a job and contribute." Marcus nodded. "You're right. I'll make that clear when she arrives." But as we cleaned up the remains of dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing good would come from Selena's return. The past has a way of catching up, even if you barricade the door. The next morning I woke up feeling uneasy. Today was the day Selena would arrive. Marcus had cleared out the small guest room for her, but I doubted she'd be happy with the cramped space. Over breakfast, Marcus tried reassuring Eli. "Don't worry, I'm sure Selena has grown up a lot since I last saw her. Just try to make her feel welcome." Eli nodded, but I could tell he was dreading her arrival as much as I was. Around noon, we heard a car pull up outside. "That must be her," Marcus said. My heart pounded as we went to the front door. A blonde girl stepped out of a beat-up hatchback jammed with clothes and boxes. She looked nothing like the sullen, scrawny 13-year-old I remembered from the divorce hearings years ago. She'd grown tall and pretty, wearing stylish clothes and expertly applied makeup. But her bright smile didn't reach her eyes. Marcus hugged her awkwardly. "Welcome home, Selena." "Thanks, Daddy," she said sweetly, though she'd made no effort to contact him since the divorce. "It's so good to see you again." Over the next hour, Selena carried in her boxes and bags, piling them in the small guest room despite the lack of space. She rejected Marcus's offers to help, barking at him not to touch her things. So much for her growing up, I thought. At dinner, Selena dominated the conversation, chatting about herself and sprinkling in subtle insults toward me. "I can't believe you're still working as a nurse, Lena. Wouldn't you rather do something more interesting?" I bit my tongue. Nursing was my passion, but Selena clearly looked down on it. When Eli talked about applying for college scholarships, Selena laughed sharply. "Good luck getting enough money to attend a decent school." Eli's face burned. I knew how hard he'd worked for those scholarships, maintaining straight A's while excelling at sports. After dinner, I pulled Marcus aside. "We need to set ground rules for Selena," I urged. "No more of this entitled behavior." He sighed. "You're right, I'll talk to her." But over the next few days, nothing changed. Selena continued acting rudely, while doing nothing to get a job or help around the house. My patience wore dangerously thin. Then came the final straw. I arrived home from work one evening to find Selena gone and Eli sitting alone, his face pale. "What's wrong?" I asked. "She stole my laptop, and my money jar was empty." His lower lip trembled. "There was over $500 in there from my job." Rage boiled inside me. That money represented years of Eli's hard work and sacrifice. When Selena finally swanned in, I confronted her. "Give back Eli's money and his laptop now." She smirked. "Or what? You'll kick me out." I wanted to slap that smug look off her face. But violence wouldn't solve anything. Selena was toxic, destroying all she touched. I had to protect my family from her, even if it meant driving away Marcus's daughter for good. I decided right then and there. Selena had to go. Her toxic behavior was destroying our family, and I refused to let that continue. When Marcus came home, I told him what Selena had done. She stole from her own brother after we opened our home to her. "I want her out, Marcus. Today." He looked pained. "I know Selena's behavior is unacceptable, but she's still my daughter. If we kick her out now, she'll have nowhere to go." "So we just let her keep stealing from us?" I cried. "She's manipulating you. Can't you see that?" "Give me a little more time to work things out with her," Marcus pleaded. "With some boundaries, I think Selena can change." I shook my head in frustration. Marcus's parental guilt was blinding him to Selena's true nature. But I had to pick my battles carefully to avoid damaging my marriage. "1 week," I said. "If her behavior doesn't improve drastically in 1 week, she has to leave." Marcus agreed reluctantly. I only hoped we could limit the damage Selena inflicted before then. But over the next few days, things only got worse. Selena stayed out partying all night, then slept past noon. She helped herself to my jewelry, claimed they were just loans. When I demanded she get a job, she scoffed. "Why work when Daddy lets me stay here for free?" One night, I came home to find her smoking on the couch. When I yelled at her to take it outside, she blew smoke in my face. "You're not my mother. Don't tell me what to do." I felt sick, realizing the extent of Selena's manipulation. She knew exactly how to provoke me while acting sweetly innocent around Marcus. The final straw came when I received a call from my credit card company, asking about a suspicious purchase. Over $2,000 at a luxury clothing store in LA. It didn't take a genius to realize Selena had stolen my card. She'd racked up more debt in a week than Eli and I spent on food in a month. When Marcus came home, I confronted him, shaking with rage. "Your daughter is destroying us. I want her out of this house tonight." Marcus's face was haggard. "You're right." I wanted to believe Selena could change, but clearly she's out of control. "It's me or her, Marcus," I said quietly. "Choose carefully." He pulled me into a hug. "You and Eli will always come first. I just pray we can get through this without tearing our family apart." We sat down with Selena, and Marcus told her she had to move out immediately. She flew into a rage, hurling insults and accusations. I stayed silent, letting Marcus handle his deranged daughter. When Selena stomped off to pack her things, Marcus put his head in his hands. "I'm so sorry I brought this madness into our home," he said. "You and Eli mean everything to me. However long it takes, I promise we'll recover from Selena's poison." I squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his words. With unity, we would survive this trial. Selena's twisted schemes could not break our family. The weeks after kicking out Selena were tense. Marcus tried calling her several times, but she refused to speak with him. I knew he was torn up with guilt, blaming himself for how she'd turned out. I tried reassuring him we'd done the right thing. Selena was like a tornado, destroying all in her path. We changed the locks and canceled my stolen credit card. The bank's fraud department was understanding, agreeing to waive the bogus charges. Slowly, our lives regained a sense of normalcy. Then the letter came, shattering that fragile peace all over again. It was from a bank I'd never heard of, thanking me for opening a new credit account. My breath caught in my throat as I read the attached paperwork. Someone had applied for a personal loan in my name, forging my signature on the forms. $15,000 already deposited into an unknown account. My hands shook with anger and panic. That amount of debt could devastate our family, and there was only one person who would stoop so low. When Marcus came home, I thrust the letter at him. "Your daughter is trying to destroy us. We need to call the police." His eyes widened in shock as he read the letter. My God, I know Selena has issues, but outright identity theft? He slumped at the table, head in his hands. This is all my fault. I failed her as a father. My anger thawed slightly. As much as Selena infuriated me, I knew this betrayal devastated Marcus even more. I sat down beside him. You did your best with her under terrible circumstances. Some people just refuse to change. But now we need to focus on protecting ourselves and Eli. Will you call the police to report the fraud? Marcus sighed heavily, but nodded. You're right. I need to do the responsible thing, no matter how painful. We spent an agonizing hour on the phone with the police and bank, filing reports about Selena's crime. It still boggled my mind that the smiling little girl I remembered from Marcus's wedding photos could grow into this heartless criminal. The bank investigator informed us the loan had been taken out locally, meaning Selena was still lurking nearby. The thought made my skin crawl. That night, as we lay in bed, I turned to Marcus. We'll get that loan invalidated. The bank believes we're the victims here. I hope you're right, he said. Because if not, this could financially devastate us. We could even lose the house. The unspoken fear hung heavy between us. Selena wasn't content just poisoning her father's memory of her. She aimed to completely destroy his new family, no matter the cost. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I repeated a silent mantra. Selena's scheming couldn't touch us, no matter how hard she tried. Goodness and truth would prevail. But in my heart, I harbored a cold anger I'd never felt before. If Selena continued threatening my loved ones, I would stop at nothing to take her down. Over the next few weeks, we heard nothing from Selena. The bank was investigating the fraudulent loan, buying us time before the debts came due. The police had tried visiting Selena's last known address, but she'd already vacated her apartment, leaving no trace. Marcus spent hours scouring online records, trying to find where Selena had disappeared to, but it seemed she knew how to avoid being caught, a true con artist. Then on a sunny Saturday, everything changed again. Marcus was at a weekend teaching conference, so Eli and I decided to see a movie together. But when we returned home, I instantly sensed something was wrong. The front door was ajar. My pulse pounded as I rushed inside, Eli close behind. Wait in the hall, I told him. If Selena was lurking inside, I didn't want Eli getting hurt. I crept forward, peering into the darkened rooms. At first, nothing seemed disturbed. Then I reached Eli's bedroom. The entire room had been ransacked. Dresser drawers flung open, mattress upended, closet ransacked. Eli rushed in behind me, crying out in shock. That's when I saw the paper on his bed, scrawled with a taunting message, "College fund gone. Oops, better start bussing tables, loser brother." Red spots swam before my eyes. The college fund Marcus and I had painstakingly built for Eli, untouched until now nearly $20,000 for his future, was gone. Stolen by Selena to fund her extravagant tastes, while she left crude insults for the brother she'd never bothered to know. I heard a strangled sob behind me. Eli's face was white, eyes glittering with tears. All that money you saved for me, gone. I wrapped my arms around my kind, diligent son, so undeserving of this cruelty. We'll figure this out, I promised. But inside, my blood boiled. That money was meant to give Eli a chance at a better life. And Selena had snatched that dream away without a second thought. When Marcus arrived, he broke down at the violation of our home and Eli's loss. I rarely saw my soft-spoken husband enraged, but today his fury mirrored my own. Our savings drained, our locks picked, our son senselessly tormented. Enough was enough. Selena had to face consequences before she destroyed more innocent lives. The next evening, ignoring Marcus's warnings, I drove to the rundown motel where Selena was rumored to be staying. Sure enough, I spotted her beat-up hatchback out front. I banged on her door until she finally opened it, smirking when she saw me. Well, if it isn't St. Lena, come to preach about morality? I slapped her across the face. You absolute monster, I spat. Wasn't ruining our lives once enough for you? Selena's grin vanished. You'll regret that, Butch, she hissed, lunging toward me. We scuffled briefly before I shoved her back inside, slamming the door in her contorted face. I strode away, trembling but resolute. One way or another, Selena's reign of terror ended today. I had given her every chance to change. But some people rotted from the inside out, beyond hope of redemption. Dragging them from the darkness risked them pulling you down into their depths. Selena had proven herself a soulless parasite, incapable of goodness. Now it was time to excise her from our lives for good, before her fangs struck again. In the weeks after my confrontation with Selena, I waited on edge for her retaliation. Marcus increased security around our home. I pulled Eli from school, not wanting him alone until Selena was apprehended. But as days passed with no sign of her, we began to breathe easier. Maybe she had realized her crimes would catch up with her if she stayed in town. Then, late one night, I awoke to blaring fire alarms. Marcus and I rushed to Eli's room and found it filled with smoke, flames licking up one wall. We grabbed Eli and raced outside, moments before the fire engulfed his bedroom. As firefighters extinguished the blaze, suspicion gnawed at me. This was no electrical mishap. Selena had made her final, desperate play for revenge. The police investigation confirmed my fears. Traces of gasoline had been splashed along one side of the house and ignited. A disturbing amount, enough to incinerate us as we slept if the timing had been slightly off. Marcus's face was haggard as he spoke to the investigators. "My daughter Selena Rogers is your arson suspect. We have evidence she committed identity theft and burglary against us. This fire was her latest attempt to harm my family." With the troubling revelations about Selena's escalating crimes, the police finally took serious action. They obtained security footage from nearby cameras showing a figure in Selena's car fleeing the neighborhood right before firefighters arrived. Arrest warrants were issued. Selena's name and photo were distributed to local media, labeling her an armed and dangerous fugitive. Marcus even made a direct plea for Selena to turn herself in, promising she'd still receive due process. But Selena remained in hiding, our lives frozen in limbo as we waited for the snake to strike again. I stayed locked indoors with Eli, rifles and fire extinguishers within reach. She'd taken so much from us already. I refused to let her steal our sanity, too. Then late one evening, I got an unexpected call from the lead detective on our case, his voice urgent. "You need to check the news right away. Selena Rogers was just apprehended." I grabbed Marcus and Eli, and we turned on the TV with trembling hands. A breaking news report showed Selena in handcuffs outside a pawn shop, stolen jewelry and electronics scattered at her feet, the very items she'd looted from our home. She cursed and spat at reporters as police stuffed her in a squad car. Selena had grown so convinced of her own invincibility that she'd slipped up and gotten caught red-handed. As the reporters recounted Selena's shocking crimes against her own family, her reputation lay in tatters, the real monster exposed underneath the pretty surface. I almost pitied her. Almost. That night, with Selena in a cell and our home protected, we finally slept in peace. The next weeks would be difficult, untangling the wreckage Selena left behind. But the storm had passed. Her lies could haunt us no more. A new dawn had broken, full of promise and hope. In the weeks after Selena's arrest, we slowly regained a sense of normalcy. With Selena locked up on multiple felony charges, the dark cloud that had choked our home finally lifted. I took Eli out for belated birthday celebrations at his favorite restaurants. Marcus and I spent evenings reminiscing about happier times before Selena's arrival. We started making plans to repair the fire damage and replenish our drained finances. There were still court dates looming. Marcus agonized over having to testify against his eldest daughter, no matter how estranged they'd become. I tried to steel my heart, reminding myself of all the suffering Selena had inflicted. Then we received shocking news. While in jail awaiting her trial, Selena had gotten into a violent fight with another inmate. The details were murky, but the results were clear. Selena was dead. Marcus took the news hardest of all. He locked himself in our room for days, torn apart with guilt. I focused my energy on comforting Eli, who despite everything felt saddened at the loss of a sister he'd never known. In the weeks that followed, we learned more disturbing details about Selena's final days. The inmate she'd clashed with claimed Selena had bragged about the rush she got from deceiving people, saying she wished she'd stolen triple the amount from us. Hearing Selena's callous words helped harden my heart. She'd felt no remorse for destroying lives. In the end, her greed and aggression had collided with someone equally vicious. With Selena gone, the case against her unraveled quickly. The bank rescinded her bogus loan applications, removing that crushing debt burden. The police helped retrieve some of our stolen funds from her apartment and storage unit. At the same time, sympathies poured in from our community, people horrified at Selena's behavior once her crimes became public. Many had known Marcus and I as a loving couple and parents for over a decade. They rallied around us, raising money to help Eli pay his college tuition. Their generosity stunned me. After writhing in Selena's web of isolation and deceit, the support of true friends felt like waking up from a nightmare. I saw it dawn on Marcus, too. We were not alone. Good people could conquer evil together. On the anniversary of Selena's death, we visited her grave for the first and only time. Marcus knelt by the modest stone and whispered a prayer. I stood back with Eli, giving them space. She wasn't born bad, Eli said quietly. Do you think if she'd made different choices, she could have been happy? I hugged my wise son close. I think we all forge our own path. Selena chose destruction, but life marches on. Now we walk in the light again. Marcus joined us, finally looking at peace. He took my hand, a gentle smile on his face. Thank you for staying by my side, he said. Your love guided me out of the darkness. Together, we turned and walked into the sunset, leaving Selena's tempestuous ghost behind. The future awaited, bright and full of hope. In the months after Selena's death, our family slowly healed. The fire damage was repaired, stolen money recovered, debts settled. Bit by bit, we reclaimed what Selena had tried destroying. But some wounds aren't visible. I woke choking from nightmares of flames engulfing our home. Marcus withdrew into himself for days at a time, brooding with guilt, and Eli became quieter, jumping at small noises and keeping his bedroom door locked. So I suggested we start seeing a family counselor. At first, Marcus resisted, ashamed at needing help, but eventually he agreed it was necessary to fully mend our battered spirits. Our sessions proved intensely cathartic. We spoke of betrayal, violation, anger. The counselor taught us coping techniques for anxiety and PTSD. He urged us to vocalize our feelings rather than bottling them up, which had strained my relationship with the brooding Marcus. I discovered depths of pain in Marcus I'd never realized. He admitted part of his desperation to help Selena stemmed from regret over his failures with her as a child during his divorce. The counselor eased his shame, reframing his efforts as misguided rather than malicious. For Eli, the greatest solace came from restoring normal routines. He rejoined school sports teams, volunteered at a homeless shelter, and took a part-time job at an ice cream parlor. Focusing on productivity and community engagement helped alleviate his sense of helplessness. 6 months later, with our counselor's approval, we decided to close the book on our tribulations with Selena. We used the last of her recovered stolen money to take a family trip to Hawaii, visiting breathtaking beaches and eating decadent dinners. No friction, no drama, just joyful quality time together. On the final night, Marcus and I renewed our vows on the beach under a sunset, Eli proudly officiating. I gazed lovingly at my two men, my champions. Selena had tried tearing us apart. Instead, we'd emerged stronger than ever. Not all scars fully disappear, but you can choose to wear them proudly, refusing to let past pain define you. Our family embodied that resilience. On the plane ride home, I penned a journal entry I later shared with Marcus and Eli. The past year contained agonizing trials, but also profound growth. We cling closer now, wounds healed into wisdom. Selena acted as a wicked knife, slicing open old injuries and inflicting new ones. But we three are the stitching, holding fast, binding up the cuts, making whole what was rent. Our imperfect family will not just survive, but thrive. The darkness recedes, healing dawns, and the light everlasting remains. Later that week, I tucked my journal away in a keepsake box. The final remnants of Selena's ruination, trial transcripts, bank statements, police reports, went into the trash for good. Marcus hugged me close. It's finally over, he said. Now we build something beautiful from the ashes. I smiled up at my husband, then pulled Eli into our embrace. The storm had passed, our lives stretched ahead, sunny and bright, and we would walk this new path arm in arm, faces tilted toward the light.
On my first day in the office, my overbearing mother-in-law handed me a mop and ordered me to clean the floor. I refused because I had been appointed as a personal advisor, not a cleaner. She became angry and demanded, "Why don't you obey my orders?" Furious, she threw hot coffee on me, burning my hand and face. I was in pain and crying. To my shock, my husband sided with her and kicked me out of the house. An hour later, I returned with my brother and gave them a shocking surprise they could never have imagined. I still remember the day I first met Liam. It was during our second year in college, and we were both finance majors. Liam was charming, with an easy smile and an ambition that matched my own. We started as study partners, then friends, and soon enough, we were inseparable. By the time we graduated, we were deeply in love, and marriage felt like the natural next step. After graduation, I had dreams of making a mark in the world of finance, but Liam's family was rooted in tradition. His mother, Caroline, was an imposing woman who seemed to have a strong hold over every aspect of Liam's life. She ran their family business in Chicago and had made it clear from the beginning that she valued control and loyalty above all else. When Liam proposed, I was thrilled. We moved to Chicago shortly after, and I was hopeful for a fresh start, a life of love and mutual respect. Initially, things seemed wonderful. Liam was attentive, and Caroline, while stern, was cordial enough. But as the days turned into weeks, the cracks began to show. Caroline had a way of making me feel small, without saying much. She would comment on everything, from the way I dressed to how I cooked, always with a thinly veiled criticism. "Oh, Barbara, you're so modern," she'd say with a laugh, as if it were a flaw. I brushed it off at first, telling myself that adjusting to a new family takes time. But it wasn't just her words. It was her actions. She'd rearrange the kitchen after I had organized it or redo tasks I had completed, as if to say I wasn't good enough. Liam, unfortunately, did little to intervene. "She's just like that," he would say, shrugging off her behavior as unchangeable. Still, I held on to hope. I thought if I could prove my worth, things would get better. I decided to approach Liam about joining their family business. With my finance degree and fresh perspective, I believed I could contribute meaningfully. Liam was hesitant at first. "You know how my mom is," he said. "She likes to keep things traditional." "Liam, I just want to help," I replied. "I want to be part of this family in every way." Eventually, he agreed. "Fine," he said, though his tone didn't sound entirely supportive. "I'll talk to her." The morning of my first day at the office, I dressed carefully, wanting to make a good impression. I arrived with excitement, ready to prove myself. But when I walked into the office, Caroline's face froze. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone sharp. "I've joined the business," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Oh, really? And what do you think you'll be doing here?" Before I could answer, she continued, "You can start by cleaning the office. There's a mop in the closet. You'll find it soon enough." I was stunned. "That's not my job," I said firmly. "I'm here to work in finance, not as a cleaner." Her face darkened. Without warning, she grabbed a cup of hot coffee from her desk and hurled it at me. The liquid scalded my hand and soaked my blouse. I gasped in pain, staring at her in disbelief. "Now clean this up," she said with a sneer. Liam, who had been standing nearby, said nothing. He just looked away, as if he couldn't be bothered. That moment broke something in me. The humiliation, the pain, and Liam's silence, it was too much to bear. I left the office, tears streaming down my face, my heart heavy with betrayal. That night, I packed my things and called my brother, Ethan, who lived in New York City. He was my anchor, the one person who had always believed in me. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling, "I need your help. I can't stay here anymore." "Barbara, what happened?" he asked, his tone filled with concern. I told him everything, the insults, the coffee, Liam's indifference. By the end, I could hear the anger in his voice. "Come to New York," he said. "You don't have to deal with this alone." And just like that, I knew what I had to do. The life I had dreamed of with Liam was gone, replaced by a reality I could no longer ignore. My love for him had been overshadowed by his silence and Caroline's cruelty. It was time to leave and start anew. As I boarded the train to New York, I felt a mix of emotions: sadness for what I had lost, anger for how I had been treated, and a quiet determination to rebuild my life. What I didn't know was that this journey would lead me to uncover secrets that would change everything. Leaving Chicago felt like shedding a heavy weight. When I arrived in New York City, Ethan was waiting for me at the station. His warm hug and reassuring smile were exactly what I needed. Ethan had always been my rock, calm, wise, and fiercely protective. "Barbara," he said gently as we sat down in his apartment later that evening, "I'm glad you're here. But we need to talk about what happened." I recounted everything: Caroline's insults, the coffee incident, and Liam's complete lack of support. As I spoke, Ethan's expression shifted from concern to anger. "She had no right to treat you that way," he said firmly. "And Liam, he should have stood by you." "I know," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "But it's not just about the humiliation. There's something else, Ethan. I can feel it. The way Caroline runs the business, the way Liam avoids discussing it. It doesn't add up." Ethan leaned forward, his lawyer instincts kicking in. "What are you saying?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I want to find out. I want to know the truth about them, about the business. If they're hiding something, I need to expose it." Ethan nodded. "Then we'll start digging. But we need to be smart about this. If they're involved in something illegal, it could be dangerous." Over the next few days, Ethan and I came up with a plan. He suggested hiring a private investigator, someone who could look into Liam and Caroline's financial dealings. I agreed, knowing that I wouldn't be able to uncover much on my own. The investigator, a sharp and discreet man named Robert, agreed to take the case. "I'll need some time," he said. "But if there's anything suspicious, I'll find it." While Robert began his work, I decided to focus on my own research. Using the skills I'd honed during my finance degree, I started analyzing public records, financial statements, and anything else I could get my hands on. It wasn't easy. Caroline and Liam were careful to keep their dealings private, but I found small discrepancies, subtle signs that something wasn't right. Ethan was my constant support, guiding me through the legal aspects and keeping me grounded when the frustration became overwhelming. "Barbara," he said one evening, "you're doing the right thing. Don't let them intimidate you." Weeks passed, and then Robert called. "Barbara," he said, his voice serious, "we need to meet. I've found something you'll want to see." When Ethan and I met Robert at his office, he laid out the evidence he'd gathered. Bank statements, offshore accounts, falsified invoices, it was all there. The numbers didn't lie. Caroline and Liam were involved in massive financial fraud. They had been embezzling funds, laundering money through shell companies, and evading taxes for years. As I stared at the evidence, a mix of emotions washed over me. Anger at their deceit, sadness for what could have been, and determination to bring them to justice. "There's more," Robert said, interrupting my thoughts. "It seems Caroline had plans to pin the financial irregularities on you, Barbara. She's already started creating a paper trail to make it look like you were involved." My heart sank. The humiliation, the coffee, the insults, they weren't just acts of cruelty. They were part of a calculated plan to frame me. Ethan placed a hand on my shoulder. "We won't let that happen," he said firmly. "We'll fight this." The next few days were a blur of activity. Ethan and I worked closely with Robert, compiling the evidence into a comprehensive case. I used my finance expertise to trace the flow of money, creating detailed reports that would be impossible to refute. As we prepared to take the case to the authorities, I couldn't help but think about Liam. How much had he known? Was he as deeply involved as Caroline, or had he been manipulated too? The thought of him standing by silently while his mother plotted against me filled me with a sense of betrayal I couldn't shake. One evening, as Ethan and I reviewed the final pieces of evidence, he looked at me and said, "Barbara, are you ready for this? Once we go to the authorities, there's no turning back." I took a deep breath, the weight of everything settling on my shoulders. "I'm ready," I said. "They've taken enough from me. It's time to fight back." The following morning, we submitted the evidence to the federal authorities. It was a nerve-wracking experience, but I felt a sense of relief knowing that the truth was finally coming to light. As we left the federal office, Ethan turned to me. "This isn't over yet," he said. "But you've already won, Barbara. You stood up for yourself. That takes courage." His words stayed with me as we walked away. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. The battle wasn't over, but I was no longer the helpless victim. I was in control of my story now, and I wasn't going to let Caroline and Liam take that away from me. What I didn't know was that the fight was about to get even more intense, and the secrets we uncovered would shake me to my core. When I decided to take the evidence to the authorities, I thought the hardest part was behind me. But I was wrong. What came next was a whirlwind of revelations, confrontations, and emotions I wasn't prepared for. A few days after submitting the evidence, Ethan and I were contacted by the federal investigators. They needed us to clarify some details and provide context for the documents we'd shared. I sat across from the agents in a sterile, dimly lit room, answering their questions with as much clarity and composure as I could muster. "This is a strong case," one of the agents said, sliding the evidence across the table. "But we'll need your testimony to solidify it. Are you willing to do that?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes to make sure they face justice." While the investigation progressed, the authorities began surveilling Caroline and Liam's business activities. Ethan and I were warned to keep everything confidential. "Don't let them suspect anything," one of the agents had said. "We need the element of surprise." It wasn't easy to act as if nothing had changed. Caroline and Liam tried to reach out to me, likely to gauge whether I was still a threat. Liam left several voicemails, his tone switching between guilt and anger. "Barbara, you can't just walk away like this," one message said. "Come home, and let's talk." But I knew better. His words were hollow. He had stood by while his mother humiliated me and plotted to destroy me. There was nothing left to say. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. Robert, our investigator, called with a critical update. "Barbara," he said, his voice urgent, "I've uncovered something bigger. You need to hear this in person." Ethan and I met Robert the next morning at his office. He looked more serious than usual, which made my stomach churn. "Barbara, it turns out the fraud isn't just about money laundering and embezzlement," Robert began. "They've been involved in smuggling, too. We found evidence linking them to an international ring." My mind raced. Smuggling? That was far beyond what I had imagined. Robert handed me a folder. Inside were detailed reports and photographs, transactions for illicit goods, correspondence with shadowy international contacts, and shipment manifests that pointed to illegal activity. "It's not just Caroline and Liam," Robert continued. "They have partners in this. Powerful ones. That's why they've been untouchable for so long." I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just about exposing them, it was about dismantling an entire network of corruption. As the gravity of the situation sank in, I realized how dangerous this had become. But I couldn't back down now. "What happens next?" I asked Ethan. "We take this to the investigators," he said firmly. "But we need to be careful. If Caroline or Liam suspects anything, they might try to retaliate." The following weeks were some of the most nerve-wracking of my life. Federal agents began preparing for a raid on Caroline and Liam's business, gathering the final pieces of evidence. I was kept in the loop but warned to stay low. It was during this time that Liam made one last attempt to manipulate me. He showed up at Ethan's apartment unannounced. I opened the door and froze when I saw him standing there, his face a mixture of desperation and anger. "Barbara," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You don't understand," he said, his tone softening. "My mother, she's not as bad as you think. She's just protective. She didn't mean to hurt you." I stared at him, disbelief and anger swirling within me. "Not as bad as I think." I shot back. "She threw coffee at me. She humiliated me. And she's trying to frame me for crimes she committed." Liam looked away, his jaw tightening. "I didn't know about that," he admitted. "But you can't let this go any further. You don't know what you're getting into." His words confirmed what I already suspected. He knew about the illegal activities, but he had chosen to stay silent. "I'm done with your lies, Liam," I said, my voice firm. "You and your mother will have to face the consequences." For a moment, he looked as though he wanted to argue, but then he turned and walked out without another word. The raid happened 2 days later. I wasn't there to witness it, but the agents told us it went as planned. Caroline and Liam were arrested on multiple charges, including tax evasion, embezzlement, money laundering, and smuggling. But the most shocking twist came during their interrogation. Caroline had been laying the groundwork to frame me for the financial crimes. She had even falsified emails and documents in my name, creating a narrative that would have made me the perfect scapegoat. When the investigators told me this, I felt a wave of both anger and relief. Anger at her calculated cruelty, and relief that we had stopped her before she could execute her plan. As the news of their arrest spread, their once powerful empire crumbled. Their partners began distancing themselves, and the media exposed every detail of their corruption. But even as I watched their downfall, I knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life and proving that I wasn't a victim. I had fought back, and for the first time in a long time, I felt in control of my story. What I didn't anticipate was how deeply their betrayal would continue to haunt me. The battle wasn't just against them. It was against the scars they had left behind. And that was a fight I would have to face alone. The arrests of Caroline and Liam sent shockwaves through their world. Their glamorous facade, the successful business, the influential connections, crumbled under the weight of their crimes. The media swarmed the case, plastering their faces across headlines. The story of their betrayal and illegal activities became the talk of Chicago. But for me, this wasn't a victory parade. It was closure. For weeks after their arrest, I was called in to provide testimony and clarify evidence. Sitting across from federal agents, recounting every detail of my experiences, felt like reliving a nightmare. But I knew it was necessary. I wanted the truth to be heard, not just for my sake, but for everyone they had wronged. The most harrowing part came during the trial. As I sat in the courtroom, Caroline and Liam avoided looking at me. Their lawyers tried to paint them as misunderstood and hard-working businesspeople, but the evidence was undeniable. Bank records, falsified documents, offshore accounts, all of it proved the extent of their crimes. The moment that hit me the hardest was when Liam took the stand. He looked like a shell of the man I had once loved, his arrogance replaced by desperation. Under cross-examination, he admitted to knowing about the illegal activities, but claimed he had been coerced by his mother. "She controls everything," he said, his voice breaking. I didn't know how to stop her. I felt a pang of pity, but it was fleeting. He had choices. He could have stood by me. Instead, he had chosen silence and complicity. The verdict was swift and damning. Caroline and Liam were found guilty on multiple charges, including fraud, tax evasion, and smuggling. Caroline received a 25-year prison sentence, while Liam was sentenced to 15 years. Watching them being led away in handcuffs was a bittersweet moment. After the trial, I felt a strange sense of emptiness. I had fought so hard for justice, and now that it was over, I wasn't sure what came next. For weeks, I stayed with Ethan, trying to process everything. One evening, as we sat in his living room, he said, "Barbara, you've done something incredible. You stood up for yourself and brought down people who thought they were untouchable. But now, it's time to think about you. What do you want for your futures?" His words stayed with me. I realized I had spent so much time fighting the past that I hadn't thought about what came next. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I decided to use my experience to help others. With Ethan's encouragement, I started my own financial consulting firm in New York City. I wanted to help small businesses avoid the traps of corruption and mismanagement that had destroyed Liam's family. The work was fulfilling, but the scars of betrayal lingered. Trust didn't come easily anymore. I kept people at arm's length, afraid of being hurt again. But over time, I found healing in my work and in the support of those who truly cared for me. One day, as I was walking through Central Park, I stopped to reflect on everything that had happened. The pain, the betrayal, the fight for justice, it had all shaped me into the person I was now. Stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Looking back, I realized that Caroline and Liam's betrayal had taught me something important. It had shown me the value of standing up for myself, of not letting anyone silence my voice. Life didn't turn out the way I had envisioned when I married Liam, but I found something better, a sense of self-worth that no one could take away. As I stood there, watching the sun set over the city, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. The fight was over, and I had won, not just in the courtroom, but in reclaiming my life. This was my story, and it was only just beginning. I never expected to discover my husband's betrayal during what should have been a normal Sunday brunch. But there I was, frozen in my own hallway, listening to him plot with his parents about how to get his hands on my family's money. My name is Sloan, and until that moment, I thought I had a pretty good handle on my life. I'm a music teacher, married to Reed, who I thought was the love of my life, and mother to our amazing 3-year-old daughter, Lila. My parents built a comfortable life for themselves through hard work, and I've always been proud to follow their example of independence. She just needs the right push, Reed was saying in our living room, his voice carrying that smooth, confident tone he usually reserved for his sales pitches. If we can convince her to quit teaching, she'll have to rely more on her parents' support. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart pounding. Lila was upstairs taking her nap, and I'd just come back from checking on her when I heard them talking. "Darling, you're being too subtle," my mother-in-law Camille's voice dripped with honey-coated venom. "That salon chain her mother runs is worth millions. Sloan needs to understand that her little music teaching career is, well, beneath her potential." Beneath her potential? I mouthed silently, my hands clenching into fists. "It's not that simple," Reed sighed. "Sloan's stubborn about her independence. She gets that from her father." "Well, her father's not getting any younger," Grant, my father-in-law, chimed in. "And neither is her mother. Have you looked into their estate planning?" I felt sick. The conversation continued, but their voices became muffled by the blood rushing in my ears. 3 years of marriage, and I'd never heard Reed talk about me like this. Like I was some puzzle to be solved, a resource to be mined. The worst part? They were discussing my parents' money as if they were already dead. My mom, who still works 60-hour weeks at her salons because she loves what she does. My dad, who still tinkers with new tech innovations in his home office, more alive than ever in his retirement. I must have made some sound because the conversation in the living room suddenly stopped. Taking a deep breath, I straightened my shoulders and walked in, plastering on my best teacher smile, the one I use when catching students passing notes in class. "Hey everyone," I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "Having a nice chat?" Reed's face flickered with something. Guilt? Concern? Before settling into his usual charming smile. "Hey, babe. We were just talking about your career." "Oh." I picked up my coffee mug from the side table, needing something to do with my hands. "Anything interesting?" Camille jumped in, all perfectly manicured nails and practice concern. "Darling, we were just discussing how you could have so many more opportunities if you weren't tied down to teaching. With your family's resources." "My family's resources," I interrupted, taking a slow sip of my now cold coffee, "are exactly that. My family's." The room went quiet. Reed shifted in his seat, that familiar crease appearing between his eyebrows, the one that shows up when a sale isn't going his way. "Sloan," he started, but I cut him off with a look. "I think I need some air," I said, setting down my mug with a careful precision that belied the trembling in my hands. "Would you all mind watching Lila for a bit? I just need to clear my head." As I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked exactly the same as I had this morning, but everything felt different. The woman staring back at me had just discovered that her marriage might be built on a foundation of lies. And she was already planning what to do about it. The week after I overheard Reed's conversation with his parents, I found myself sitting at my parents' dining table, watching my mother arrange flowers like nothing was wrong with the world. I hadn't told them about what I discovered yet. How do you tell your parents that their son-in-law sees them as a walking investment portfolio? "You're quieter than usual," Mom said, trimming a stem with practiced precision. "Is everything okay with Lila?" "Lila's perfect," I replied, managing a small smile. "She's with Reed at his parents' house." Mom's hands stilled for a moment. "Ah." Camille and Grant's. The way she said their names told me everything I needed to know about her opinion of my in-laws. I should have paid more attention to her instincts 3 years ago. They're hosting a dinner tonight, I continued, tracing the wood grain of the table with my finger, to discuss a new business venture. Dad looked up from his tablet, his engineer's mind already clicking into gear. What kind of venture? I don't know yet, but they specifically requested that you and Mom come too. Did they now? Mom's voice had that edge to it, the same one she used when dealing with difficult suppliers for her salon chain. How interesting. The doorbell rang before I could respond. My stomach dropped when I saw Reed through the window, arriving early with his parents in tow. Lila wasn't with them. Where's Lila? I asked as soon as they entered. The nanny's watching her, Reed answered smoothly, kissing my cheek. We thought it would be better to discuss business, without distractions. I caught the look that passed between my parents. They'd always supported my decision to keep teaching after Lila was born, unlike Camille, who called it playing at having a career. Dinner was a masterclass in passive-aggressive warfare. Camille praised Mom's cooking while simultaneously suggesting she must be too busy with her little salons to cook often. Grant kept steering the conversation toward retirement planning, while Reed maintained his salesman's smile, watching everyone like he was waiting for the perfect moment to close a deal. So, Reed finally said, setting down his wine glass. We wanted to discuss an exciting opportunity. Here it comes, I thought. There's this amazing property development project, he continued. Premium location, guaranteed returns. But we need initial investors. My father's expression didn't change, but I saw his hand tighten around his fork. And you're bringing this to us because? Because family should help family, Camille jumped in. And with your resources, it would be such a shame not to. Our resources, my mother interrupted, are already allocated to expanding the salon chain. We're opening 3 new locations next month. I watched Reed's face fall slightly before he recovered. But surely some diversification would be wise? Marlo, your business is successful, but property development could provide much better returns. Better returns than the business I built from nothing? Mom's voice could have frozen hell. The business that put Sloan through college debt-free? That's not what Reed meant, Camille said quickly. We just think. I know exactly what you think. I cut in, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. You think my parents' money is your safety net. You think my mother's business is just a stepping stone to something better. You think I should quit my job and let my husband handle the finances. The room went dead silent. Reed stared at me, his charm cracking to reveal something darker underneath. Have you been eavesdropping on private conversations? Private conversations about my family's money? I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Yes, I heard everything last Sunday. And I've been watching you ever since, waiting to see if you'd come clean. Instead, you brought your parents here to help you pitch this scheme. Sloan, Reed started, but my father cut him off. I think it's time for you all to leave, Dad said quietly. His calm tone carried more weight than any shout. As they left, Reed lingered in the doorway. We'll talk about this at home. No, I replied. We won't, because I'm staying here tonight, with my daughter. You can't just watch me. After they left, I sat between my parents on the couch, feeling like a kid again. Except this time, the monster wasn't under my bed. It was wearing my wedding ring. I'm so sorry, I whispered. Mom squeezed my hand. Don't be sorry. Be smart. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I never meant to become a detective in my own marriage, but there I was at midnight, scrolling through Reed's laptop while he slept upstairs. The house was silent except for the hum of the heating system and my racing heart. What started as a gut feeling led me to his email. The password was still Lila's birthday, something that should have been sweet but now felt like another manipulation. My hands trembled as I clicked through folder after folder, each one revealing another piece of the puzzle I wished I'd never started solving. Oh God, I whispered, staring at a bank statement. The numbers didn't lie. Reed had been hemorrhaging money for months. Failed investments, hidden credit cards, loans I never knew about. But what made my stomach turn was an email thread with his parents about accessing Marlo's business accounts. The floor creaked behind me. Find what you're looking for? I spun around to find Reed standing in the doorway, his face half hidden in shadow. He didn't look angry. Worse, he looked calculating. How long have you been planning to steal from my mother's business? My voice was steady, despite the tremor in my hands. Steal is such an ugly word. He stepped into the room, running a hand through his sleet-messed hair. I prefer to think of it as redistributing family resources. Family resources? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean the business my mother built from nothing? The one she worked 18-hour days for? The one that could save us? He slammed his hand on the desk, making me jump. Do you know what it's like, living in the shadow of your family's success? Having everyone compare me to your father? So, this is about your ego? This is about survival. He leaned closer, his charm completely gone now. I'm drowning here, Sloan. The property development deal fell through. I owe people money. How much? More than you want to know. I stood up slowly, putting distance between us. And you thought the solution was to steal from my mother? I thought the solution was to use available resources to… Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop with the sales pitch. For once in your life, be honest. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the facade. Fine. You want honest? I'm broke. Everything I built is gone. And your parents? They're sitting on a fortune while watching me fail. They worked for that fortune. And I worked too. His voice rose, making me glance nervously at the ceiling, thinking of Lila. But nothing I do is ever enough. Not for them. Not for my parents, not for you. Don't you dare make this about me, I hissed. I loved you. I supported you. I never once asked about money. Exactly. He laughed bitterly. You never had to ask about money. You've always had it as a safety net. Must be nice. I opened my email and started forwarding myself copies of everything I'd found. Reed watched me, his jaw tightening. What are you doing? Protecting my family. I met his eyes. You have 12 hours to tell my parents everything or I will. And believe me, you'd rather it come from you. You're bluffing. Try me. I grabbed my phone and headed for the stairs. I'm getting Lila. He caught my arm. It's the middle of the night. Let go of me. My voice was ice. Or the first call I make won't be to my parents. It'll be to the police. His hand dropped. As I packed a bag for Lila, I could hear him pacing downstairs, making phone calls in hushed, angry tones. I knew he was calling his parents, probably trying to damage control. Let them try. 20 minutes later, I was buckling a sleepy Lila into her car seat. Reed stood in the doorway, watching us. This isn't over, he said. You're right, I replied, starting the car. It's just beginning. As I drove through the dark streets toward my parents' house, Lila dozed in the back seat. I caught glimpses of her in the rearview mirror, so innocent, so unaware of how her world was about to change. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my resolve strengthening. Reed was right about one thing. This wasn't over. But he had no idea what was coming next. They say bad news comes in threes. I just never expected all three to hit within 24 hours. The first came at dawn, when my lawyer called to tell me Reed had already withdrawn half our savings. Legal, since both our names were on the account, but devastating nonetheless. I sat in my parents' guest room, watching Lila sleep while my hands shook around my phone. The second blow landed at noon. Mom collapsed at one of her salons. Stroke, the doctor said in the sterile hospital hallway. She's stable, but the next 48 hours are critical. I stood there, numb, as Dad gripped my hand. The fluorescent lights made everything look harsh and unreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. The third hit just before midnight. A text from an unknown number. Thought you should see this. Attached was a photo of Reed leaving a hotel with Camille, carrying documents. The timestamp showed it was taken just hours after I'd left with Lila. I was still staring at my phone when Dad came back from the coffee machine. The vultures are already circling, he said quietly, handing me a cup. Reed's been calling the salon managers, trying to get financial information. How did you? Maria called. She's worked with your mother for 15 years. She knows something's wrong. He sat heavily in the plastic chair beside me. They all do. A nurse walked past, her shoes squeaking on the linoleum. Through the window of Mom's room, I could see her lying there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. The woman who taught me to stand on my own 2 feet couldn't even breathe without machines. Dad, I started, but my voice cracked. I know. He pulled out his tablet, pulling up documents I recognized from Mom's office. Your mother and we've been expecting something like this. Not this exactly, but what do you mean? We've seen the way Reed and his parents look at what we've built, like it's their backup plan. His fingers moved across the screen, entering passwords. Your mother made some changes last month. Transferred majority control of the salons to you. The coffee cup nearly slipped from my hand. She what? She said she had a feeling. He smiled sadly. She always did have good instincts about people. A commotion at the nurse's station made us both look up. Reed was there, arguing with security, Camille hovering behind him with her perfect makeup and predatory eyes. Sir, only family is allowed, the guard was saying. I am family, Reed's voice carried down the hall. That's my mother-in-law in there. I stood up, my body moving before my brain could catch up. Dad grabbed my arm. Let security handle it.
No.
I handed him my coffee. I need to end this now. Reed saw me coming and switched on his concerned husband act. Sloan, baby, I've been so worried. Save it. I stopped just out of reach. I saw the hotel photos. His face flickered with surprise before settling into righteous indignation. You're having me followed? Apparently someone else is. I glanced at Camille, who had the decency to look uncomfortable. What documents were you reviewing with your mother at the Grand Hotel? That's private business. Nothing about my family's business is private to you anymore. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You have exactly one chance to walk away with your dignity intact. Leave now, or I release everything I found on your laptop to every investor you've ever worked with. Camille grabbed his arm. Reed, let's go. But he shook her off, his mask finally cracking. You think you can threaten me? I know things too. Things about your father's tech patents, about what? Dad's voice came from behind me, steady and cold. Please, enlighten us about my business, Reed. I'm very interested in hearing what you think you know. The security guard stepped closer. Sir, I need you to leave. For a moment, I thought Reed might actually try to fight. But then his shoulders slumped, and I saw him clearly for the first time, a scared little boy playing at being a businessman, drowning in his own lies. This isn't over, he said, but the threat sounded hollow. Actually, it is. I turned back toward Mom's room. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow. As they were escorted out, I heard Camille hissing at Reed, but I didn't bother listening. I had more important things to focus on, like protecting what my mother had built, like being the daughter she always believed I could be, like making sure the people who tried to destroy my family never got another chance. The salon mirrors reflected my mother's empty office chair as I sorted through the mess Reed had left behind. 3 days after her stroke, and I was already finding holes in the business accounts, small at first, then larger, like a trail of breadcrumbs leading to something worse. MS. Sloan, Maria, our head stylist, appeared in the doorway. They're here again. I didn't need to ask who they were. Through the glass walls, I could see Camille and Grant in the waiting area, dressed like they were heading to a board meeting instead of a beauty salon. Send them in. I kept my eyes on the computer screen, making them wait as I finished reviewing another suspicious transaction. Sloan, darling. Camille's perfume arrived before she did. We've been trying to reach you. I've been busy discovering what your son did to my mother's business. I finally looked up. Would you like to explain these transfer authorizations with your signature on them? Grant shifted uncomfortably. Now, Sloan, business is complicated. Theft usually is. I turned the screen toward them. Did you think no one would notice? That my mother would just write it off as a family favor? Your mother understood the importance of family, Camille said, her voice sharp. Unlike you, apparently. I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. Family? Is that what you call embezzlement these days? We prefer to think of it as a temporary reallocation. Grant pulled out a folder. Actually, we have a proposal that could solve everyone's problems. The only problem I have is sitting in front of me. Camille leaned forward, her designer bracelet catching the light. Your mother's in the hospital, Sloan. The business needs strong leadership. Reed has experience. Reed has experience stealing from it. I stood up, my chair rolling back. And now I know you helped him. Be reasonable, Grant pleaded. We can make this go away. Sign over controlling interest to Reed, and we'll forget about pressing charges for the irregularities we found in your father's tech patents. My blood ran cold. What irregularities? Camille smiled, all teeth and triumph. Let's just say Reed did his homework. It would be a shame if the patent office received an anonymous tip about your father's early development processes. The pieces clicked together. Reed's late nights researching, his sudden interest in Dad's old projects. They'd been planning this for months. Get out. My voice was steady, despite the rage building in my chest. Think about Lila, Camille pressed. About her future. About what a messy legal battle would do to her. Something in me snapped. I picked up my mother's heavy glass paperweight, turning it over in my hands. You know what my mother told me about building this business? She said sometimes you have to be willing to break things to build them stronger. I brought the paperweight down on the corner of her desk, cracking the glass surface. They both jumped. That was your first warning. I set the paperweight down carefully. Here's your second. I have copies of everything. Every transfer, every forged signature, every reallocation. One phone call, and it all goes to the FBI. You wouldn't, Grant stammered. Think about Reed. I am thinking about Reed. I'm thinking about how good he'll look in orange. I walked to the door, holding it open. You have 24 hours to return every penny, or I start making calls. And if you ever mention my daughter again, I'll make sure the only way you see her is through prison visiting room glass. After they scurried out, Maria appeared with a cup of tea. Your mother would be proud, she said quietly. I looked at the cracked desk, thinking of Mom lying in that hospital bed, of Dad poring over his old patents, of Lila asking why she couldn't go home. No, I replied, picking up my phone. Not yet, but she will be. I dialed my lawyer's number, watching Camille and Grant hurry to their car through the salon windows. They thought they could use my family against me? Fine. Time to show them exactly what kind of woman my mother raised. Time to make them regret ever hearing the name Sloan. The divorce papers sat untouched on Reed's desk while he paced his office like a caged animal. I'd chosen this moment carefully, after hours, when his staff had gone home. But before he could escape to whatever hotel he was hiding in these days. You can't be serious. He picked up the papers, then dropped them like they burned. After everything we've built. You mean after everything you've stolen? I stayed standing, keeping the desk between us. The salon accounts, my father's patents, our savings? I was trying to save us. He slammed his hands on the desk. Your parents have been holding us back, controlling everything with their money. The only one trying to control anything is you. I pushed the papers toward him. Sign them. He laughed, a harsh sound that made me flinch. Or what? You'll tell Daddy? Have him sue me? Go ahead. I'll drag every skeleton out of his closet. Every shortcut he took building his precious tech empire. You're bluffing. Am I? He pulled out his phone, showing me documents I'd never seen before. Your father wasn't as clean as you think. Want to know how many corners he cut? How many people he stepped on? My hands started shaking. Those are fake. The patent office won't think so. His smile turned cruel. Neither will his investors. One anonymous tip, and it all comes crashing down. You destroy him just to hurt me? I destroy him to protect what's mine. He stepped around the desk. Including you. I backed away, bumping into the wall. I was never yours to own. No. He moved closer. Then why did you marry me? Because you loved me? Or because your parents approved of my pedigree, my connections? Stop it. Face it, Sloan. You're just like me. Playing the game. Using people. I'm nothing like you. Really? He grabbed my wrist as I tried to leave. Then why are you here alone? Why didn't you bring your lawyer? Because you thought you could manipulate me, just like your mother taught you. I yanked my arm free. Don't talk about my mother. Poor Marlowe, he continued, his voice mocking. All those years building her empire, and now she can't even speak to defend it. How long before the board pushes you out? A month? A week? Something inside me snapped. I grabbed the nearest object, a crystal award from his desk, and hurled it at the wall. The crash was satisfying, but not as satisfying as the way he jumped. You want to talk about manipulation? My voice shook with rage. Let's talk about how you and your parents planned this from the beginning. How you married me for my family's money. How you... The office door opened. Camille stood there, looking perfectly composed despite the late hour. I thought I heard voices. She glanced at the shattered crystal. Having a disagreement? Get out, I spat. I'm afraid I can't do that. She held up her phone. Not when I have such interesting security footage of you assaulting my son. My blood ran cold.
What?
You throwing things, threatening him. She clicked her tongue. Not very maternal behavior. I wonder what a judge would think about Lila's safety with such an unstable mother. The room spun. They'd planned this too. The confrontation, the security footage, everything. You wouldn't dare use my daughter against me. Try us. Reed's voice was soft, dangerous. Sign over your controlling interest in the salons, and we forget this happened. Fight us, and you'll lose everything. The business, your father's reputation, and Lila. I looked between them, mother and son, so alike in their calculated cruelty. All my careful plans, my evidence of their theft, meant nothing if they could paint me as unstable, dangerous. I'll give you 24 hours to decide, Camille said, as if offering a generous gift. Choose wisely. They left me there, surrounded by shattered crystal and broken dreams. My phone buzzed, a text from Dad about Mom's condition worsening. Another from my lawyer warning about Reed's countersuit. I slid down the wall, the divorce papers scattered around me like fallen leaves. For the first time since this nightmare began, I had no idea how to fight back. But I knew one thing. I couldn't let them win. Not just for me, but for Lila. For Mom. For everything our family had built. I just had to figure out how. The moment I walked into Reed's parents' house, I knew something was wrong. The place was too quiet, too still, like a trap waiting to be sprung. I found them in the study, Reed, Camille, and Grant, arranged like a tribunal behind the massive oak desk. The security footage from Reed's office played silently on a laptop between them. Where's Lila? I asked, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Safe, Camille replied. With the nanny. We thought it best to handle this professionally. I set my own laptop on the desk. Funny.
I was thinking the same thing.
Reed's smirk faltered when I opened it, revealing a video chat window. Maria's face appeared, along with my father's lawyer and, most surprisingly, Grant's former business partner, Thomas. Hello, Grant, Thomas said, his voice crackling through the speakers. Been a while. Grant's face went pale. What is this? This, I said, pulling out a USB drive, is everything. The real records from the salon accounts. Dad's original patent documentation. And something really interesting from Thomas about some creative accounting you and Reed did at your old firm.
Camille stood up sharply.
You're bluffing. Like you were bluffing about that security footage? I played my own recording from my phone, which had captured the entire setup at Reed's office. Amazing what modern phones can do, isn't it? Reed lunged for my laptop, but I was faster, stepping back. Don't bother. It's all backed up. And if anything happens to me or Lila, it goes straight to the FBI. You destroy your own family? Reed's voice cracked. Your daughter's future? No, Reed. I'm saving it. From you. We can still work this out, Camille interjected, her perfectly manicured hands spreading in a placating gesture. We're family. Family? I laughed. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't use a 3-year-old as leverage. Family doesn't. Oh, spare us the moral high ground, Reed snapped. You're just like us. using whatever advantage you can get. The difference is, I'm not doing this for money. I turned to Thomas. Show them. Thomas shared his screen, displaying financial records that made Grant audibly gasp. This is what they really took from your mother's business, Sloan. And this. More documents appeared. This is what they were planning to do next. The room went silent except for the hum of the laptop fans. I watched their faces as they realized just how thoroughly I'd outmaneuvered them. Here's what's going to happen, I said, pulling out a stack of papers. You're going to sign these, all of you. Full confession of the theft, immediate repayment of everything you took, and a legally binding agreement to stay away from my family's businesses forever. And if we refuse? Camille's voice trembled slightly. Then Thomas sends everything to the SEC. I'm sure they'd be very interested in Grant's creative accounting methods. And Reed. I met his eyes. Those investors you scammed? They're very eager to talk to the FBI. Reed slumped in his chair, the fight draining from him. You've been planning this all along. I learned from the best. I pushed the papers toward them. You taught me how to play the long game, remember? One by one, they signed. Even Camille, though her hand shook with barely suppressed rage. As Thomas and the lawyer witnessed the signatures virtually, I felt no triumph, only exhaustion. One more thing, I said, pulling out the divorce papers. Full custody of Lila. Non-negotiable. Reed stared at the papers for a long moment. Can I still see her? Supervised visits. If you get help, real help, not just playing the victim. He signed without another word. As I packed up my laptop, Grant spoke for the first time. What happens now? I paused at the door.
Now?
You get to experience what it's like to build something honest for once. To earn what you have. I looked at each of them in turn. Consider it a gift. More than you gave my family. I left them there, surrounded by the ruins of their schemes, and went to collect my daughter. It wasn't the revenge I'd originally wanted, but it was something better, justice, with a chance for redemption. Mom would have approved. 6 months later, I stood in my mother's renovated office, watching the sunset paint the salon windows gold. The place hummed with the familiar sounds of hair dryers and quiet conversation, a symphony Mom had conducted for decades. MS. Sloan. Maria appeared in the doorway. Your 4 o'clock is here. I checked my watch, surprised. Send him in. Reed looked different. Thinner, less polished. The designer suits were gone, replaced by a simple button-down and jeans. He carried a thick folder and something else I couldn't quite see. Thanks for meeting me, he said, hovering in the doorway like a stranger, which I supposed he now was. Lila's excited about the zoo tomorrow, I offered, keeping things neutral. The supervised visits had been going well, better than I'd expected. He nodded, then placed the folder on my desk. I've been doing some research about small business loans, specifically for salon expansions. There's a program that could help with those 3 new locations you're planning. I stared at him. Why? Because I owe you. More than money. He shifted uncomfortably. I've been working with a financial advisor, helping other people avoid the mistakes I made. It's good work. Honest work. And your parents? Haven't spoken to them since the divorce. They're in Florida now, trying to rebuild with what's left.
He paused.
I'm not asking for forgiveness, Sloan. Just a chance to do something right for once. I opened the folder, scanning the carefully organized documents. The research was thorough, professional, exactly what the business needed. Why now? Because Lila asked me something at our last visit. He pulled out what he'd been holding, a framed photo of Mom cutting the ribbon at her first salon opening. She wanted to know if her grandmother was a superhero because of how you talk about her. My throat tightened. What did you tell her? I told her the truth. That her grandmother built something amazing, and that her mother is even stronger for protecting it.
He set the photo on my desk.
I found this in my parents' storage. Thought it belonged here instead. I picked up the photo, remembering that day. I'd been 12, watching Mom shine with pride as she built her dream from nothing. Just like I was doing now. The loan program, I said finally. Is it legitimate? Completely. I'll send all the information to your lawyer first. No strings, no involvement from me unless you want it. I studied him, this new version of Reed, humbled, but somehow more real than the polished salesman I'd married. I'll think about it. He turned to leave, then stopped. You know what the hardest part was? Realizing I had everything I needed already. A family, a home, love. I just couldn't see it through my own greed. And now I see clearly. He smiled sadly. Too late, but clearly. After he left, I sat at Mom's old desk, my desk now, and looked at the photo. The setting sun caught the glass, reflecting my own face over hers. Different women, different battles, same determination. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Mom squeezed my hand today. Doctors say it's a good sign. I smiled, touching the frame gently. Maybe Reed wasn't the only one getting a second chance. Maria knocked softly. The staff meeting's ready. We're discussing the expansion plans. I stood, straightening my jacket. Actually, I have some new information to share about that. From Reed's proposal? Maybe. I picked up the folder. But this time, we'll do it our way. The right way. As I walked into the conference room, I caught my reflection in the salon mirrors, not just Mom's daughter anymore, but my own person. Someone who could protect what mattered while still leaving room for growth, for change, for redemption. Even for those who might not deserve it. Because that's what real strength is, not just knowing how to fight, but knowing when to build something new from the ashes of what was lost. And we were just getting started.
I sat in the stillness of my apartment the night before what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. My phone rang, slicing through the quiet. It was Richard, my fiancé. Hello? Richard, is everything okay? I asked, sensing something off in his voice. Elena, I can't marry you, Richard said, his voice devoid of the warmth I knew. A cold wave of shock washed over me. What do you mean? This isn't funny, Richard. It's not a joke, Elena. I'm already married, to someone else. His words were like a dagger to my heart. Married? But we're getting married tomorrow. How could you do this? I struggled to keep my voice steady. I just can't be with someone who overshadows me. You're a top executive, and I'm not. It's too much for me. His tone was emotionless. So this was about his ego. You knew about my job. For 2 years you said nothing, and now this? I need someone simpler, someone who doesn't outdo me. The mix of hurt and disbelief inside me was boiling into anger. And you decide this now, the night before our wedding? Who is she, Richard? It doesn't matter. I've made my choice. You coward, I hissed, anger surging. You let me plan our life together, and now you're backing out like this. I'm sorry, Elena. It is what it is. You're not sorry. You're a coward. I'm glad I know your true colors before it's too late. There was a pause. You'll regret this, Elena. You need me. I don't need a man who doesn't respect me. Goodbye, Richard. I ended the call, my hand shaking with a mix of rage and shock. Sitting alone, the magnitude of the conversation hit me. The man I thought I knew was nothing but a lie. But amidst the hurt, I felt a surprising relief. This wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning. My chance to rebuild my life without Richard's deceitful shadow. My heart hardened with determination. Richard had wounded me deeply, but I wouldn't let him get away with it. He would regret crossing me. I would make sure of that. I lay awake that night, the darkness of my bedroom mirroring the turmoil in my mind. How had I not seen Richard's true colors? Our relationship, once a source of joy, now felt like a well-crafted facade. The painful realization stung. I thought back to how it all started. My uncle, a well-respected businessman, had introduced me to Richard. He's a promising sales manager, he had said. You two might hit it off. I was reluctant, but I agreed to meet Richard out of respect for my uncle. Our first meeting was at a quiet cafe. Richard was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my career as a marketing executive. We clicked instantly. I thought I had found someone who understood and respected my ambitions. But as I lay there, replaying our conversations, the signs were clear. Richard's subtle digs at my achievements, his veiled comments about women in leadership, they were all red flags I had ignored. He was never proud of me. He was intimidated by me. I remembered the times he'd belittle my work. It's just marketing, Elena. It's not like you're saving lives, he'd scoff. His words, once brushed off as harmless jokes, now echoed in my mind as clear indicators of his resentment. It dawned on me that his recent behavior, the late nights, the sudden business trips, it wasn't just work. He was seeing someone else. The pieces fell into place, forming a picture of betrayal. I got out of bed, my mind racing with anger and hurt. Richard had humiliated me, but I wasn't going to let him have the last word. He had underestimated me, and that was his biggest mistake. I opened my laptop and began to draft an email to my colleagues. Richard and I had invited them to our wedding, and they deserved to know the truth. I wrote with a clear purpose, detailing Richard's betrayal without sounding bitter. I wanted the facts to speak for themselves. As I hit send, a sense of empowerment washed over me. This was just the beginning. Richard had tried to break me, but instead he had awakened a strength I never knew I had. I would make him regret ever taking me for granted. The game had just begun. The next morning I woke up to a flurry of messages. Colleagues, friends, family, everyone was shocked. The news of Richard's deceit had spread like wildfire. There was an outpouring of support for me, but among these, one message caught my eye. It was from Richard. "Can we meet?" "I think there's been a misunderstanding," his message read. Misunderstanding? The audacity of that word made my blood boil. I agreed to meet him, not for reconciliation, but to confront him, to face the man who had tried to break me. We met at a park, a neutral ground away from prying eyes. Richard was there, looking disheveled, a stark contrast to the composed man I once knew. "Elena, thank you for meeting me. I think you got it all wrong," he started, but I cut him off. "Save it, Richard. There's nothing you can say to justify your actions. You're a liar and a cheat. What did you expect, calling off our wedding and admitting you're already married?" Richard's face reddened. "I didn't expect you to react this way. You're blowing this out of proportion." "Out of proportion? You were living a double life, Richard. What did you expect me to do? Smile and wish you a happy marriage?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I know I messed up, but can't we put this behind us? I mean, we were good together, weren't we?" I stared at him in disbelief. "Put this behind us? You humiliated me, Richard, and now you expect me to just forget it?" "Elena, please, I know I've made a mistake, but I need you. My job is at risk because of this mess. You have connections. You can help me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You want my help? After everything you've done?" He took a step closer. "Elena, we can sort this out. I know people are talking, but we can fix this. Together." I stepped back, my resolve hardening. "The only thing that needs fixing is your moral compass, Richard. We are done. And as for your job, you should have thought about that before you betrayed me." I turned and walked away, leaving Richard standing there, a picture of desperation. I felt a surge of strength within me. Richard thought he could manipulate me, but he was wrong. I was not the same person he had toyed with. The game had changed, and I was now the one in control. The days following my confrontation with Richard were a whirlwind. My mind was constantly racing, not with sadness but with a burning desire for retribution. Richard had tried to crush me, but he had only fueled my determination. I started by reaching out to a few trusted colleagues and friends, laying the groundwork for my plan. Word of mouth was powerful, and I intended to use it to expose Richard's true character. I shared my story not as a victim, but as a survivor of deceit. My narrative was factual, yet poignant, a tale of betrayal by a man who was a master of manipulation. Then came the opportunity I was waiting for. An industry event was coming up, one Richard and I were supposed to attend together. I decided to go alone, knowing well that Richard would be there. The evening of the event, I walked into the room with confidence. I could feel the eyes on me, the whispered conversations. I spotted Richard in the crowd, his face a mask of unease. As I mingled, I overheard snippets of conversation. "That's Elena. Can you believe what Richard did to her?" The word was spreading, just as I had planned. Then, Richard approached me, his expression a mix of anger and desperation. "Elena, we need to talk. You're ruining me." I looked him straight in the eyes. "I'm not doing anything, Richard. If your reputation is ruined, you have only yourself to blame." He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Making me the villain." I pulled my arm away. "I don't need to make you a villain, Richard. You did that all by yourself." As I walked away, I could feel Richard's eyes burning into my back, but I didn't care. I was no longer the woman he thought he could control. The event was a success. By the end of the night, Richard's deceit was the talk of the town. His professional reputation was crumbling, just as he had tried to shatter mine. But this was just the beginning. I knew Richard would not go down without a fight. I needed to be ready for whatever he had planned. My resolve was firm. I would not back down. This was my battle, and I was determined to win. A few days after the industry event, I was at my office when my phone buzzed with an unexpected call. It was Richard. Against my better judgment, I answered, curiosity getting the better of me. "Elena, you need to stop this madness." Richard's voice was laced with frustration. "This isn't my doing, Richard. It's the consequence of your actions," I replied coolly. "You're destroying my career. I've lost clients, friends." His voice trailed off into a mix of anger and desperation. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to betray me and lie to everyone," I retorted. "I need your help, Elena. You have the power to fix this, to clear my name," he pleaded. "Help you? After everything you've done? You must be delusional." I couldn't hide the contempt in my voice. "Elena, please, we were good together once. Can't you remember that?" There was a hint of something in his voice that sounded almost like sincerity. "All I remember is a liar who was leading a double life," I snapped back. There was a pause on the line, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was colder, more calculating. "You'll regret this, Elena. If I go down, I'll make sure you come down with me." A chill ran down my spine at his threat, but I refused to show my fear. "Is that a threat, Richard?" "It's a promise," he said, his voice now a menacing whisper. "Good luck with that," I said, and ended the call. As I sat back in my chair, I realized that this was far from over. Richard's threat loomed over me, but I was not about to let him intimidate me. I had come too far to back down now. I started to document everything. The calls, messages, any interaction with Richard. If he was planning to come after me, I would be ready. But as I delved deeper into my preparations, I found an unexpected ally. One of Richard's colleagues reached out to me, offering information about Richard's past misdemeanors at work, instances of credit stealing, manipulation, even harassment. It was more than I could have hoped for. Armed with this new information, I knew what I had to do. It was time to take the fight to Richard. I was going to expose him for who he truly was, not just to our social circle, but to his professional world as well. Richard had started this war, but I was going to finish it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. With the information provided by Richard's colleague, I meticulously compiled a dossier of his professional misconduct. It was a damning portrait of a man who had built his career on deceit and manipulation. I reached out to Richard's company's HR department, presenting them with the evidence. The response was swift and decisive. Richard was suspended pending a full investigation. The news spread quickly, and soon Richard's professional reputation was in tatters. But I wasn't done yet. I had one last card to play. I filed a legal claim against Richard for emotional distress and the financial losses incurred due to the canceled wedding. It was a bold move, but I was determined to hold him accountable. As I walked out of my lawyer's office, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had stood up to Richard, and I had won. But it was a hollow victory. The man I had once loved was now nothing but a bitter memory. In the midst of all this, my uncle reached out to me. "Elena, you've handled this situation with incredible strength and grace," he said. I shrugged. I did what I had to do. "There's something I want to discuss with you," he continued. "I've been thinking about retirement, and I believe you're the perfect person to take over the business." I was taken aback. "Me? But, Uncle, there are others far more qualified." "You have a keen mind for business, Elena. You've shown that time and again. I can't think of anyone better to lead the company into the future," he insisted. I was hesitant at first, but as we talked, the idea began to take root. This was my chance to step out of Richard's shadow and make a name for myself. "I'll do it," I finally said. "I'll take over the business." My uncle smiled. "I knew you would. I have every confidence in you." As I left my uncle's office, I felt a sense of purpose and excitement for the first time in months. I was going to lead my uncle's company, and I was going to make it my own. Richard had tried to break me, but he had only made me stronger. I was no longer the woman he had betrayed. I was a leader a fighter, and a survivor. As I looked ahead to the future, I knew there were challenges ahead, but I was ready for them. I had emerged from this ordeal stronger and more determined than ever. Richard's betrayal had been the catalyst for my transformation. I had lost a fiancé, but I had found myself. And that was worth more than any wedding could ever be.